Pepsi Black time, 18 hours.
The news from Guyana, the region and the world. Compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom and powered by DemeraraWaves.com.
The news comes to you compliments of KFC. It's finger licking good. With the news at this time, I am Ruth Wilson. Good evening. First, the highlights. Anti-narcotics agents are continuing their probe into the discovery of a large quantity of marijuana aboard a Panamanian registered cement ship in Guyana. Bank's DIH group of companies says it made a $1.5 billion after-tax profit last year. In the region, Barbadians are about to await the results of today's general elections. A New York-bound Caribbean Airlines plane had to be diverted to Virginia in the United States after cracks developed in the windshield. And internationally, former Cabinet Minister David Davis has joined calls for Boris Johnson to stand down, telling the Prime Minister, "In the name of God, go." Details of these and other stories in a moment.
Is it a special occasion? Are you on a budget but still want a filling and also mouth-watering meal? Look no further. KFC is here for you at 9 locations and 6 drive-thrus, including the Amazonia Mall at Providence, which now delivers from Shore Base to Little Diamond. Call 632-0533, 608-0162, or 503-3591. KFC.
It's finger licking good.
And now for the news in detail. The Health Ministry says 162 persons are now hospitalized across Guyana with COVID. Of that number, 18 are severely sick and are receiving intensive care. According to the official figures released this afternoon, 11,639 persons are now being told to isolate themselves at home. 27 others have been quarantined to ascertain whether they will develop symptoms of the viral disease. The Health Ministry also says that 743 new cases have been detected within the past 24 hours. The national death toll dating back to March 2020 is now 1,108. According to the Ministry of Health, 7 more persons have died from COVID-19. They include a 4-month-old baby. The other 6 persons are in their 60s. 1 of them was fully vaccinated, 2 were partially vaccinated, 2 were unvaccinated, and the vaccination status of 2 others was not known. Despite the almost 2-year-long COVID-19 pandemic, the bank's DIH group of companies are expanding its operations. Chairman and Managing Director Clifford Rees says that lands are being acquired at Bartica and Vredenhoop, on which 2 new quick-serve restaurants will be built. Mr. Rees also says that the soft drinks plant syrup room and the blending facility are being upgraded to produce Minute Maid products under license from Coca-Cola. The bank's DIH chairman says in his 2021 annual report that a new malt and rice mill, as well as a new centrifuge system, will be added to the brewery. Also, he says that a new bottled water packaging line will be installed at the industrial site location. Mr. Rees says that the financial year, which ended in September 2021, was affected by the COVID lockdown. However, with the lockdown lifted, he says that the bank's DIH group was able to deliver home delivery packs. According to the bank's DIH chief, there were unavoidable increases in the cost of raw and packaging materials, spares, and fuel. He says that the availability was affected by global supply chain problems, but bank's DIH upgraded its plant and machinery to extract better yields from raw materials being used. The bank's DIH group recorded an after-tax profit of $6.7 billion in 2021 compared to $5.2 billion in 2020. He says that this was due to a 6% increase in sales, 17% increase in dollar sales turnover, the management of operational expenses, and better yields derived from the use of raw materials. A quantity of marijuana was Wednesday found aboard a Panama-registered cement carrier cargo vessel. The Customs Anti-Narcotics Unit says that so far, the captain and other officers have been detained for investigations. Kanu said that several parcels of marijuana, a foreign type known as creepy, with a total weight of more than 16 kilograms or 36 pounds, were found throughout the vessel. The marijuana has a street value of 14 million Guyana dollars. Head of Kanu, James Singh, said that of the 19 foreign nationals, the main suspects, who are the captain, engineer, and other senior officers, have been detained. The others remain aboard the vessel that is moored at the Guyana National Industrial Corporation's wharf, Lombard Street, Georgetown. People's National Congress Reform's PNCR Christopher Jones on Wednesday stepped aside to allow Viceroy Jordan to become the vice chairman of their party after they tied at the recently held internal party elections. In a statement, Mr. Jones said he was making way for young, fresh and vibrant leaders like Mr. Jordan to take the PNCR into the future. The two obtained 381 votes for the post of vice chairman. Mr. Jones added that he remained a member of the PNCR's Central Executive Committee, having won the second highest votes. He says he will continue to function as an executive member of the mighty PNCR. Mr. Jones secured 586 votes, making him the second highest vote getter for a seat on the 15-member Central Executive Committee. Mr. Jones said he ought to give way to Mr. Jordan after lengthy discussions with the leadership of the party. You're still with us on News Talk Radio Guyana 103.1 FM on YouTube and Facebook. It is 18 hours 7. We now turn to news in the region. Barbados are wrapping up voting in general elections at this hour. The elections were held after the High Court ruled that an application by a small opposition party was not properly filed, as it should have been done, to the election court. That party had said that 5,000 persons would be disenfranchised because they are COVID positive. More in this report from Starcom Network's Voice of Barbados.
Despite indications that the overall voter turnout may be low, Chairman of the Electoral and Boundaries Commission, Leslie Haynes, says there was steady voting in Barbados, especially this morning. He spoke to Starcom Network News after he and Chief Electoral Officer Angela Taylor toured several polling stations.
All reports are that polling was, as to be expected this morning, heavy, and it's now petering out. As we speak, there were one or two little issues that we have overcome, so that polling is going smoothly as we speak.
He spoke of a minor issue at one polling station.
One issue was, according to one politician or one candidate, that a ballot box would not open because, as you know, the ballot boxes at the beginning of the polls should be open to show that they are empty. So one ballot box, there's a little problem with it. It was difficult to open, but that held up the line a little bit. But that too was resolved, and things started.
Mr. Haynes notes that strict COVID-19 protocols were in place.
When we visited some polling stations, the sanitizers were doing their jobs quite well and efficiently, because we had two sanitizers, one at the beginning of the line and one before you enter the polling station at some polls. Well, the electorate for the rest of the day, we would like them to go between now and 4:30 before the people who come off of work to go and vote, so that we don't have those big lines this afternoon. You know, we would prefer a trickle throughout the day rather than very heavy lines in the afternoon. But as you know, and as the COVID unit would tell you, heavy lines and many people increase your risk.
Chairman of the Electoral and Boundaries Commission, Leslie Haynes.
That report from Starcom Network's Voice of Barbados. We now turn over to Trinidad. 2 men have been arrested and charged after they skimmed a credit card belonging to a government senator earlier this month. The Trinidad New Day newspaper reports that police said the senator reported to police on January 7 that his card had been skimmed and used. Police then arrested the two men last week, Wednesday. Investigators said they found several items at the homes of both men, which they suspect were bought using the skimmed credit card. The men, 34 and 29, were charged on January 16. The 34-year-old was charged with 11 counts of larceny and 1 count of fraudulent use of a credit card, and the 29-year-old was charged with 2 counts of receiving stolen items. They appeared before a Port of Spain magistrate on Monday and were granted bail. They are expected to return to court on February 10. And a technical issue forced the Caribbean Airlines flight to be diverted to Norfolk, Virginia, in the United States of America this morning. BW520 departed Piarco at 11:48 p.m. and was en route to New York's John F. Kennedy Airport when cracks developed in the jet's windshield. Guardian Media understands 111 passengers and crew were on board. Data from flight tracking website flightradar24.com shows that at 3:34 a.m. the aircraft slowed from 427 knots to 309 knots and descended from 38,000 feet to 27,000 feet in the space of 8 minutes. This is most likely as a result of crew action, as this is the standard operating procedure in such a situation. The aircraft continued its descent and landed safely at 4:36 a.m. in Virginia. At 18 hours 11, we now bring you the news, international news from the BBC.
This is the BBC News with Fiona MacDonald. Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba has warned that Russia is trying to sow panic in his country and has called for intense diplomacy to avert a war. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who's in Kiev for talks, said that Russia could attack at very short notice. Moscow has about 100,000 troops at the Ukrainian border, but denies it's planning an invasion. Sviatoslav Rurash, a prominent Ukrainian MP, says a Russian invasion would have grave consequences.
I am desperately hoping that all of these intelligence reports released by Western intelligence services are wrong and we will not have a Russian invasion. But certainly we are looking at a heightened risk of that. Russia has been increasing its military presence on the border with Ukraine, not just in the east, but all across the border, not to mention the Belarusian border.
Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson says he'll fight on despite fresh demands for him to quit over allegations of staff parties that broke COVID lockdown rules. One previously loyal ally, the former Brexit Minister David Davis, told him he had failed to take responsibility for his actions and said, "In the name of God, go." Mr Johnson again urged people to wait for the outcome of an investigation into the revelations. Our political editor Laura Koonsberg has more.
There's a very uneasy limbo. Quite a lot of MPs and ministers still reserving judgment until the official inquiry into exactly what happened done by the senior official Sue Gray emerges. That now probably won't happen until the beginning of next week, but a lot still could change in the next few days. Boris Johnson seemed today to have more fight about him, but number 10 certainly right now can't afford any more nasty surprises.
Some 1,200 Brazilian police have been deployed in one of Rio de Janeiro's most violent shanty towns. They're taking part in an operation to retake control of the area from the powerful drug trafficking organisation, the Red Command. Leonardo Rocha reports.
Heavily armed military police entered the narrow streets of the Jacarezinho neighborhood in the early hours of the morning. Residents feared a repeat of the violence seen in May, when a similar incursion ended with the death of 28 people. That was the most deadly police operation in Rio de Janeiro's history. Human rights organizations said many of the victims were extrajudicially executed by the security forces. There are no reports of clashes between the police and residents so far this time, but dozens of people have been arrested.
The head of a people trafficking operation in which 39 Vietnamese migrants died has been sentenced to 15 years in prison by a court in Belgium. Vo Van Hong, who's himself Vietnamese, was convicted of leading a gang that charged people more than $27,000 each to be smuggled into Europe, then on to the UK. The victims were found dead in a lorry trailer in England in 2019. BBC News. The Peruvian government has said that an oil spill at a seaside refinery on Saturday, linked to the eruption of a volcano in Tonga, is the worst ecological disaster the area has seen in many years. The Foreign Ministry said that the Spanish energy company Repsol must pay for the damage and clean up the coastal area affected near the capital Lima. The authorities in Ethiopia have released a journalist who was detained more than a month ago under state of emergency laws. Ma'aza Mohammed, who was not charged, has been critical of the government. She's the fourth journalist to be released in recent days. A British man who was told by a judge to read classic literature after being found guilty of a terrorism offence has been jailed. The Court of Appeal in London concluded that the original sentence was unlawful. Ben John had been told to read works by Jane Austen and Shakespeare as part of the punishment, believing it would help his chances of rehabilitation. Phil Mackey reports.
Ben John was found guilty of a terrorist offence last August and given a suspended sentence and a 5-year serious crime prevention order. As part of that, Judge Timothy Spencer told the former student to report back and prove he'd been reading some of the classics. 2 weeks ago, he returned to court with copies of Twelfth Night and Pride and Prejudice and told the judge he preferred Shakespeare to Jane Austen. But today, the Solicitor General, Alex Chalk QC, argued that the seriousness of John's offence ought to have meant a jail term. He described the 22-year-old as having a warped world view after being captivated by the ideologies of hate.
Heavy snow has hit camps for displaced people in northern Syria. Tents have collapsed under the weight of the downfalls and surrounding roads have been blocked. Some of the worst affected areas are Aleppo province and parts of the rebel stronghold of Idlib. Torrential rain and melting snow have brought floods to other parts of the region. BBC News.
And that's the news to the moment.
On the go and need to grab a quick bite, but tired of the same dreary food? Well, KFC is here to brighten your day with a delicious, mouth-watering meal with their 9 convenient locations: Movie Town, Vlisingen Road, Mandela Avenue, Regent Street, Stabroek, Hink Street, Breedenhoop, Parika, and the Amazonia Mall. Now open from 9 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. And they're there to welcome you every day. KFC.
It's finger licking good.
To end the news, here's a recap of the highlights. Anti-narcotics agents are continuing their probe into the discovery of a large quantity of marijuana aboard a Panamanian-registered cement ship in Guyana. Bank's DIH group of companies says it made a $1.5 billion after-tax profit last year. In the region, Barbadians are about to await the result of today's general elections. A New York-bound Caribbean Airlines plane had to be diverted to Virginia in the United States after cracks developed in the windshield. And internationally, former Cabinet Minister David Davis has joined calls for Boris Johnson to stand down, telling the Prime Minister, "In the name of God, go." The news came to you compliments of KFC. It's finger licking good.
This has been the news, compiled in the News Talk Radio newsroom. For ongoing updates, visit demerarawaves.com, and you can check facebook.com/demwaves and twitter.com/